Hello and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show, brought to you by progressivechristianity.org. Hope you will check out all the wonderful progressive Christian resources we have available for you there. I'm Caleb and I'm here today with my good buddy Mark. How are you doing today, Mark?
Doing great, man. Doing great. Ready for the show. Ready for the show.
Of course, yeah. Highlight of my week, as
Yeah.
always. Good to be with you, Mark. And I hope you will all follow us on social media. Check out progressivechristianity.org on social media. Check out the Moonshine Jesus Show on social media as well. And today we're going to be talking about Black Adam. It's a relatively new release. Actually, I guess just last week. It is a new release. If you haven't seen it yet, here's something you got to know. We're going to spoil it for you if you listen in. But, It might also just pique your interest. You might hear us talking about the theology, the politics of this. You're like, I got to go see Black Adam, man.
Why not? Why not? Right? Yeah, I can see that happening.
Yeah, so stay. Even if you haven't seen it, and we're going to spoil it for you, it's just going to pique your interest more. Especially if you're drinking something like I know Mark is. What are you drinking, Mark?
Well, I did a little research trying to figure out what to have. And then I stumbled across the fact that Dwayne Johnson, the star of the show and the force behind 15 years behind making this happen, he owns his own tequila. It's his favorite drink. So I looked into what his favorite tequila drinks are. And so I'm having one of his favorite tequila drinks. It's called the Orchard Apple Margarita. His tequila is called Terramana, which I could not find in North Carolina because the ABC regulations in North Carolina are just absolutely ridiculous. But it is apple juice, tequila, lime juice, and agave nectar mixed together. And so I've put one together for myself. I actually have another one to go because I got a suspicion I'm going to like this thing. So I made sure I had backup. What about you? Where did you go with this?
Yeah, it sounds pretty good. I can see why you want to back up. So I've got I thought, Black Adam, I need a drink that is really dark. And this is a DC movie. It's always dark. And I thought I need something dark.
I like this. I like the direction you're going.
So I took a Black Russian and made it a Black Adam. So it's very dark. It's just vodka and Kahlua, and it's very dark, but it's also got
incredibly
red
dark, man.
in it. Yeah, can you even see it?
I can't see through it at all.
Yeah, it's very dark, and it does have a little bit of red in it from the cocktail cherry, and that's because Black Adam does an awful lot of killing.
Absolutely.
In the show. So I needed a little bit of red in there too. So.
I like the direction you went in, man. Very much. That's very nice. Hey, cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah, it's not bad at all. It tastes like fall. I like it.
Tastes like fall. Very appropriate. Okay, well, let's have a few more sips, and then let's come back for our geeking out section.
Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Won't you shine a light?
Hello and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. You have joined us for our Geeking Out segment where we're going to commence speaking about Black Adam, just released this past weekend. It is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's new entry, his first entry into the DC universe. And I'm going to try my best to give you a synopsis of the show. It's got so many things going on. I'm going to keep it as short as possible, and I'm going to miss a lot of things in doing so. But basically, in the ancient Middle Eastern town of Kahndaq, there's a gentleman by the name of Teth Adams, and was bestowed with the almighty powers of the gods and became Black Adam. And after these using the powers for vengeance, he ends up being imprisoned. And over those next 5,000 years, the people of Kahndaq basically take him from man to myth to legend. And in the modern times, there's this person who's on a quest to locate the crown of Sabbac, which is made from this rare element called Eternium. Come on.
Because,
Called
of course,
Eternium,
yeah.
which is only found, of course, in Kondak. And the person who's doing it is archaeologist Adriana Tomaz. And she unwittingly releases Black Adam from his prison, where he finds his hometown is being oppressed by Intergang, who are trying to corner the market on Eternium, and brings his, let's call him unique form of justice, born out of rage, to try to destroy them. And his efforts are complicated by 4 members of the Justice Society arriving. And in the end, he ends up needing to face down the Intergang's leader, who acquired the Eternium crown and becomes the reincarnation of Sabbac. Did I do at least some justice to the storyline? Is there so much going on? Like, this is the weirdest. There's so much going on, and at the same time, when you watch the movie, the plot seems so freaking simple. Like, it's like bad man gets powers, and now bad man mad because people trying to hurt people from my country, so bad man hurt you bad. I mean, ultimately, it feels like that's the story, but it's actually sort of complicated at the same time. How does that happen? Help me, Caleb.
I think that this is emblematic of everything that the DC extended universe does, right? Like, you've got something that is pretty complicated and ultimately maybe not super appealing to anyone. Although, this movie really has split both critics and audiences. There's a huge gap in like the
massive
Rotten Tomato score.
Part of that's because of the way Rotten Tomatoes scores it. If you actually look at the scale of 1 to 10, the critics actually have ranked it 5.1, but because of the way they look at whether the overall review was good or bad, they give it, I think it's like a 37 or a 39 in their overall ranking. But if you look at the percentage of who said it was good and bad, it's actually slightly. I mean, it's not bad. Because
I think the Rotten Tomato score for critics is something like 52% or something like that. Maybe
has it gotten up that high now?
I think so, but I think the audience score is like 90%.
Oh yeah,
and so
audiences
liked it.
I mean, it's kind of understandable. I mean, for me, you and I have already started talking a little bit about this, and we stand slightly differently. Unlike frequently, we both just kind of like, this is incredible. For me, I really feel like the storyline was it had so much. It was trying to be too much, and at the same time didn't. Because of that, it never gave any part of the story enough concentration to make the various lines matter. So I think that's why, to me, it comes off as this overly simplistic story in the way it ends up being told, even though there's all these elements that could have been fleshed out. I also feel like there's no character development outside of Black Adam. We get several different folks that show up. Even Sabbac, the big bad guy that ends up in the end, who he has to defeat. We get no real backstory on him. And so I don't really care that Black Adam's fighting him one way or the other, ultimately. And then even our Justice League, there's no backstory to the Justice League who shows up. And I think that is actually necessary. And because of it, I think the 2 youngest members of the Justice League, Atom Smasher and Cyclone, they are somewhat interesting characters, or at least could be, but we don't get enough backstory to really care. And they don't put them in the story in any way. Like, serious question. If either of those 2 weren't there, would it have changed the story?
No, it wouldn't have. And so I think this is my major complaint about the movie. I liked it because I thought it was fun. And as you and I already discussed, even a mediocre DCEU film is a good DCEU film because they have had a terrible track record.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
This is one of my complaints about the way that I think that the DCEU tends to introduce people is and a difference between the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Marvel introduces characters often one at a time, like major characters, right? They get their own movie, and then you meet, and then the way you meet other characters is either by an introduction through their own movie or an introduction in another movie. And so this one, we got all of the characters are new, right?
Right.
We've not had
Everybody.
anyone. Everybody is new,
Mhm.
with the exception of the cameo of Superman in the mid-credit scene. And
Right.
so, like, even when Dr. Fate died,
You mean Doctor Strange?
who?
Oh,
no,
no, wait a minute.
Dr.
No, you mean-
Fate, and
Oh,
yeah, in Black
Are
Adam.
you sure?
even
Are
when-
you sure? Okay, you're right. It is Doctor Fate, but boy,
Yeah.
he was Doctor Strange. Let's just be honest.
Well-
He was Doctor Strange with the helmet. I'm just saying, like
Well,
even the
that's-
way, like all the things
Yes.
he did are things that Doctor Strange has already done,
Yes.
and even the way that they visually communicated what his powers were looked like some of the stuff that Doctor Strange learned in the Mirror Universe and used. I mean,
Right, so this is the thing with the DCEU and or DC and Marvel generally, right? Is a lot of their characters develop at the same time, kind of in competition with each other, and so it's true. Doctor Fate is the DC equivalent of Doctor Strange.
But
here's the thing: we care about Doctor Strange because he had a movie. Right? And he was in the MCU. Dr. Fate is one of my favorite DC characters.
Pretty interesting.
And I love Pierce Brosnan too.
He's incredible. As a matter of fact, he's the only thing that makes Dr. Fate work. He is so good. Without us having any backstory, his ability to communicate emotion through just the smallest movement in his face. Like I actually liked the character of Dr. Strange Fate, and because let's see,
Dr. Strange Fate. I like that. Dr. Strange.
I think part of the problem, I keep calling that up because I think part of the problem this movie is, of course they were developed about the same time and they're kind of competing characters, but there are ways that you can make him not a derivative of Doctor Strange. Like you didn't need to use the fractals in the way that he presented his magic when Doctor Strange has already done that. You could have chosen a lot of other routes, and I think they did that over and over and again. Lots of this movie to me felt like it was a derivative of other movies that already exist, even in the way that they presented things. And that's where I struggle. Now, I will say I did ultimately like the movie more than I didn't. My response earlier was when we were talking about it is, it was a pretty okay-ish movie. Like ultimately it was entertaining. Like there's no reason not to watch this movie. It's just not, it's not like a high, well done movie. And it had so many opportunities to be really interesting and engaging.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, one of the ways that it was maybe more engaging than a lot of DCEU movies is that there was humor. It was dark, and there were still like all the typical DC kind of things about dark and anti-hero and all the stuff that has really begun to feel very old. But there was humor that broke it up a little bit, and I thought that was helpful. But here's one thing that I didn't get, Mark, and I need your help because I don't get this.
I don't know if I can. Remember, you liked the movie more than I did. So
I know, but I'm not selling that, am I, Mark? I'm really not selling it.
We'll see.
So I get that this was like a pet project of The Rock, and that he'd been trying to do this for a long time. And
15 years. 15 years.
There had been discussion when Shazam came out about him being like the bad guy in Shazam. But here's what I don't understand. Like his powers are linked to Shazam's powers, right?
I know where you're going.
Why is Shazam nowhere in this movie? I mean, wouldn't it have made sense to introduce Black Adam with Shazam? Or why didn't there's a new Shazam movie coming out? Why aren't they tied together? I don't get it.
It literally makes no sense at all. And because he gets his powers from the same people that Shazam gets his powers from, and he uses the word Shazam. The only reason Shazam doesn't show up is because of the mid-scene credits scene that we got. It's because The Rock wanted to have a movie where he fights Superman. And if Shazam shows up, then the higher ups, the people in charge, are going to go, well, you should fight Shazam first before you fight Superman. Half the reason this movie was made, I am certain, is because Dwayne Johnson wants to be in a movie where he fights Superman and maybe even wins. I don't know. But that's the whole reason Shazam didn't show up. I don't care what anyone says. That is 100% because the moment he puts Shazam in this movie, then everyone says, well, clearly the first person he needs to have a battle with is Shazam. I mean,
and maybe they're trying to keep Henry Cavill in the in DC extended universe as well, because there's been a lot of talk about him, like some kind of additional movie. Because I mean, his fate in the DCEU has been kind of up for grabs, and he's been flirting with Marvel. And there's been talk of him like as the next James Bond, maybe.
Well, here's the thing: the current showrunners at DC don't want him to be the Superman. Dwayne Johnson had to go over their head to get him to make this cameo. He made the cameo, but he has no contract. There are no what was the name of his movie? The Man of Steel. Yeah, Man of Steel 2. There's not even writers working on this. They're not that interested in this project. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is who's interested in this project. He's the one that's trying to make it happen. And that's, I really do think that's why we don't end up with Shazam in it. And it's sad because he been a natural tie-in and would have helped lighten the show a bit. And it could have been fun to see the disparity between the child who has this bright kind of anything could happen and anything's possible perspective of a superhero, and then this superhero that's all about vengeance and I kill people. He says, I kill people. That's one of the things this movie is so unaware of itself and the universe it sits in. Hawkman tells him, in this world, there are heroes and there are villains. Heroes don't kill people. My first thought was, really? I mean, aren't you in the DC universe? Have you seen any DC universe like movies? Heroes kill people. Like, it happens all the time. Heroes definitely kill people. Like, it was the most ridiculous. I was like, are they serious? Like, are they trying to why are they all trying to sell this line? Because that's not real for this universe. I mean, it's not, right?
It's not. And I think that speaks to one of the bigger problems about like the fate of the DC extended universe and all is I don't think it has a clue who it is and what it's trying to be, other than it wants to do what Marvel has done. Like, if there's a way that it can do what Marvel has done and get the kind of money that Marvel has made, that's what they want to do. But like the Snyderverse that they have built is not, I think, conducive.
The Snyderverse isn't going to happen. The fact that we saw Superman show up in his classic red and blue and yellow suit, we make that it's clear. But I agree with you. I think the second thing this movie wants, besides trying to set up The Rock having a battle with Superman, is that it wants to introduce a Justice League of America so that you can have this kind of Avengers universe happening, and it seems to try to do that. It was a weird selection of folks that it picked to lead that, but
the Justice Society, right? Because we've done the Justice League. That wasn't successful. That wasn't.
We didn't make that work.
Successful.
So we're going to go back before Justice League and go to Justice Society of America and introduce that, which was a lot more folks than the Justice League really ever had. And so that's an interesting choice. We'll see what happens there. But I will say, yes, it was a good enough movie. It was okay-ish enough. But I'm going to say, man, I felt the cinematography in this movie was fantastic. I visually loved this movie. I loved the color scheme. I loved the depth of it. I loved the framing of it. It was beautifully and interestingly done. The cinematography actually gave us some of made us care about characters in a way that their lack of backstory was preventing us to have that ability. And I that was for me the outstanding part of the movie. The cinematography was just on point. It wasn't this flat, shiny, overly done Marvel Universe cinematography that we get, and those are beautiful graphics. This felt real. It felt like a movie. It felt deep and textured, and I really appreciated that about it quite a bit.
I think so too, and just in terms of costuming, because I did like Dr. Fate was Doctor Strange Fate, whatever you want to call him. He was my favorite, and I liked Dr. Fate in the
Well,
comics as well. I think he's a,
yeah.
but Pierce Brosnan, this I think still speaks to Pierce Brosnan in costume, is he incorporated a couple of his own pieces of jewelry into that costume. I think to talk about what you're to expand on what you're talking about how it felt real, is he incorporated his own wedding ring and his own timepiece. That's his classic timepiece, and thinking about Dr. Fate being able to see through different times, which I thought was kind of an interesting.
And it's interesting that was kind of like one of your favorite DC heroes. One of my favorite DC heroes happened to be Hawkman, and so him being there was really cool. I kind of geeked out through all of that, but is another reason why I kept paying attention to backstories, because Hawkman has a couple of different backstories that developed because of he's been around since 1940 something. But he was my favorite, and I really loved seeing him there. And I thought Aldous Hodge did an incredible job trying to make something of a character that wasn't given enough time. But anyway, we know that we tend to geek out and keep going, and we could do that for probably another hour if we allowed ourselves that. But that's not really what the show ultimately is about. What this show is about is taking these science fiction, fantasy, pop culture items and recognizing how that mode of storytelling allows us to investigate theological and political perspectives that can improve who we understand God to be in our spiritual life, as well as who we are in this world and the politics that are there. So let's go ahead and let go of our geeking out and come back into our theopolitical segment.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We are entering our Theopolitico segment, but before we do, I've got to know, Mark, did you pour yourself another drink? Was it good enough that you finished the first one?
You know, the glass was a little larger than I thought it was, but during this segment, you might hear a little gurgle because I am getting very close to the bottom. It is very good. I like it. Like I said, it tastes like fall. It's kind of like, a fall tequila. I like it.
Great. Okay, so here's one of the themes that really stuck out at me, Mark, and I want your perspective on this. So I think one of the main themes of Black Adam is this occupation, this continuous occupation of this place where they are living. And we see different oppressors over time take over this place. And so this made me think, of course, about ancient Judea. And once the Judeans had been conquered, then their land was occupied continuously after that, with the exception of the Maccabean revolt and the few decades that followed. And then they were occupied by the Romans, right? So whenever Jesus comes along, it's these centuries of occupation and being under the thumb of the under the thumb of the Roman Empire whenever he's coming of age and then in his ministry. And so Christianity forms as a people who are oppressed, people who are marginalized, people who are living in an occupied land. Okay, so that's the way that Christianity forms. And then Christianity ultimately becomes the empire itself. Right. So here's what I want to know, Mark, because I think Christianity is really functioning as empire today. Can Christianity function properly when Christians are the ones who are in power?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, I want to be idealistic and say, yes, if we get back to our roots and understand who we really are and begin to, study theology from folks who are outsiders, who are being oppressed, who are being marginalized. If we do that, I want to be idealistic and say, if we are willing to do that, then we will be able to understand more fully who we're supposed to be and live into it. But let's be honest, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And you nailed it. The Christian faith is a power structure now. And, it operates that way. That's why we have white Christian nationalists who are really completely at this point, the power has corrupted so much that they are ignoring the text that would tell them that all the things that they're doing stand over and against the teachings of Jesus. So no, I'm actually sort of glad to see, and people, go ahead and send me the hate mail. It's marksandlin@yahoo.com. Just go ahead and
That's brave of you, Mark.
because
Yeah.
go right ahead. Go right ahead. I'm ready for it. I'm glad the church is dying. It needs to. It's become too power obsessed and too powerful. Christianity works better from the margins. It works better when it's aligning itself with the marginalized. And for far too long, it's not been willing to do that. It's been willing to throw money at the marginalized and do charity, but it's not been willing enough overall. There's certain exceptions, but overall to do justice. And I think when it loses its power, it's much more likely to realize how aligned the teachings of Jesus are with the marginalized and with those who are oppressed. And it's more likely to live into what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that's very right, that Christianity works best from the margins. However, I think that there are those of us who find ourselves as Christians in the United States, right?
Right.
An empire, and that and we find ourselves as Christians who are also empire. Christianity has also been a major cause of empire, and I think that you're right. One of the things that we can do in the midst of all that is try to bring in marginalized voices and try to be aware of the context in which Christianity was formed.
Right.
Because I don't think that even though the church maybe is dying, and that
it's
right
definitely
now,
dying. The numbers are very clear. It is dying,
or at least institutional religion is dying. Whether or not Christianity as a whole is dying, I think
it is dying. Let's switch.
It's transforming.
Let's slip. I'm going to say something that actually I think is better. I think it's being marginalized, which is like perfect. Christianity is not dying as much as ultimately true Christianity is being marginalized, which I think is going to give it life. I think it's exactly like the upside down God that we try to understand to teach us how alive the church can be through a dying church.
I hope that there is more authentic Christianity coming forth in the way that you speak about. I hope that the kind of Christianity that survives is not the kind of Christianity that is like the Christianity that's been the most vocal kind of Christianity over the past 40 years or whatever. Because there are so many people who I think don't want to identify as Christians at all because that's the only narrative that they've heard. So I hope that like a truer, more marginalized form of Christianity that speaks about justice and peace is the kind of Christianity that is emerging. Because I agree with you. I think that's the only kind of Christianity that really deserves to survive, because the rest of it isn't authentic to Jesus at all. For the very reasons that we've talked about, because it's the kind of religion that has oppressed people and made people feel marginalized rather than empower people and give them hope for the creation of a different kind of society, a different kind of world where people are treated more fairly. So I hope you're right, Mark. I hope that's the kind of Christianity that comes forth in the midst of this transition.
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, I mean, isn't the Christianity about life after death? I mean, I don't mean like actual
Tell me
life
more.
after death.
Yeah,
but I'm just saying, like, it's not surprising that a religion that a lot of the core theology is about how you can have life after death is at a place now where it embraced power and is becoming a mockery of itself. It's not surprising that its best hope is to die so that it can be reborn into what it should be. I mean, there's some beautiful universal poetry in that ultimately.
Yeah, I think you're right that in order to be reborn, that this form has to die. And that is, I think, the central message of the faith, that sometimes things have to die to be resurrected in a better form. So I hope
it's even that there's hope in death. Like death is such a frightful and fearful thing for us. And there is such a beautiful message that we all need to have in our lives to recognize that there's actually hope in death, that hope isn't an ending, that hope is a new beginning. Not hope, but death is not an ending. Death is a new beginning. And that because of the reality of that, there is a hopeful element of endings. And it's because it's so easy to get caught up in endings being negative, and we need to recognize. I think spiritually it's important that we have that understanding that there's hope after death.
Yeah, and I like this thought of transformation in the midst of it all too, and you know that the great emergence that Phyllis Tickle wrote about probably 15 years ago
Fantastic,
now,
right?
And the church's great rummage sale, where every 500 years or so the church gets rid of old, outdated ideas, and ultimately the church is fine on the other side, or Christianity is fine on the other side. It just lives into a new method of being, and I think certainly if the past 100 years have showed us anything, it's that Christianity really does need a new form of being. Certainly longer than that, but the United States, as the religious right has hijacked the narrative, I think it's certainly true that we really need another way of being. Hey, so there's something else I want to ask you before we run out of time on this segment. So another question that or another statement that we get in this movie is Hawkman saying, "There is no we." Right? There are just heroes and villains. I think this may have been the same speech that you were talking about earlier, where he says we don't kill people. Oh, yeah. So there are just heroes and villains. Is life that dichotomous? I mean, are people either good or bad?
Right.
What do you think about that?
I mean,
what do you think about the setup for that?
I mean, obviously not. And that's a statement that's really it's a statement that you're more likely to hear coming from people who have the power than people who don't have the power. I think one of my favorite lines in it is Adriana, when the Justice League shows up and they're trying to stop the Black Adam, who's in the eyes of the people are saving them. And she says, "You like to split the world into good and bad, but that's easy to do when you're the one drawing the line." Because you have the power to define who's in and who's out. So that is not a reasonable statement. It's clearly there. I mean, that's kind of the point of the whole movie. Is like, what is a hero? Like, does a hero have to? What are the morals, the bylines, the laws that a hero has to live into, and are they always so cut and dry and shiny? Or is it sometimes necessary to stand up and be loud to make change happen? The folks in power like to make it cut and dry and like to say, no, you have to be either really, really good or really, really bad, because that allows them to keep people in their place and not to be able to access things, at least in terms of pointing fingers and saying, you're doing a horrible thing. You shouldn't be protesting in the streets, because that's not morally a positive thing. So no, I think it's a line that the powerful like to draw because it allows them to stay in power.
I think that's a great point, and especially because the people who were oppressed in the film, they were exactly right. Nobody was there, even though the inner gang. I mean, inter gang. That's they didn't get super creative on that name. It was meant to show us like they were evil, right? Justice Society didn't care until there was someone who they perceived as threatening to their own power who was there, even if it was someone who was liberating. And I think that there are parallels to the gospel on that too, right? The reason that the Romans cared about Jesus was because he was raising up the rabble. Yeah, that's right. It wasn't violent in the same way that Black Adam was. It was non-violent resistance, but he was getting people to the rabble rallied up, and they executed him for insurrection because he was claiming loyalty to a different empire.
In ancient Rome, they didn't nail you to a tree for being a nice person.
They
nailed you to a tree for being a threat to the empire.
That's right. That's right. If Jesus had just gone around talking about an afterlife.
Right.
Or if you'd just gone around giving like traditional interpretations of scripture, or if you'd just gone around like being a faith healer, because there were a lot of those, no one would have
Absolutely.
cared.
No.
And so the thing that's what most Christians think that Jesus was is blasphemous more than anything else. Because if he had done those things, he wouldn't have gotten crucified because the Romans wouldn't have cared because he wouldn't have been a threat.
Yeah, there was only one reason.
Fine. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, there was only one reason they killed you, because you were a threat to their power. That's the only reason. Yeah, you're right, man. You're completely right.
Hey, Mark, there's a lot in here, and I would really love to delve more, both into the geekiness of all this and into the political themes.
Me too, man. There's so much we haven't talked about, but we do have time constraints.
That's right. And we really do have to try and make each other look stupid.
Oh,
it's
nice.
the highlight of my week to try and do this, Mark.
Absolutely.
So how about this? Why don't we take a break, pour ourselves some more to drink, and come back and try and make each other look stupid.
Hello, and welcome back to our final segment of the Moonshine Jesus Show. This is a segment where we attempt to make our co-host, who we care much about, look stupid. So, Caleb, I'm usually benevolent, but you weren't benevolent last week, so there's no way in hell I'm being benevolent this week. The reason I'm not, the actual reason is because I want to finish the show on a high note, and my question, I'm not sure would be the high note. So here's my question. So you know that I feel like there's a lot of issues with this movie. It turns out. And I do feel like they really are sort of not aware of themselves within the MCU, which is one of the things that the Marvel universe does great. Any show that you watch with Marvel, they're very aware of the larger universe and how they plug into it, and they address it well. I'm going to ask you a question about one of the things where, as soon as it happened, I was like, what the hell? Do they not understand what? So why is the Justice Society working with or for Amanda Waller? I mean, Amanda Waller is a black ops kind of crime fighter. Like, she does the Suicide Squad. She does the Task Force X. Why is the Justice Society? I mean, I don't understand. I really like. It was one of those moments I was like, wait a minute. Why is she sending? How are they working? What?
It makes no logical sense other than they're trying to be the MCU, and they're trying to make Amanda Waller into Samuel L. Jackson's character in the MCU, the coordinator of things. And
but up until this point, up until this point, she hasn't been. She's been this outsider. I mean, it'd make a lot more sense. It makes a lot more sense that at the mid trailer thing that we got. Yeah. That she was trying to get close to Black Adam, because he is the kind of character that she aligns herself with.
That's right. Yeah.
But they have the movie have her sending people to stop him.
I'm telling you, this is emblematic of the you named it, of the lack of self-awareness of the DCEU.
Fair enough.
They don't know what or who they're trying to be. And in terms of the comic books, that's right. That Amanda Waller usually uses kind of the bad guys. You're right. To try and make this stuff. And so she usually has nothing to do with things like a Justice Society or the Justice League, because the heroes in the DC universe have always kind of controlled themselves and used their own self-restraint. And so right? Superman has always traditionally been kind of this beacon of hope. Well, in the current DCEU, he's a super dark, brooding kind of character, right? Like a paradigm shift for Superman.
Yeah.
Batman has always used this kind of self-control. He's always had these very strong lines, like he's not going to kill people. Well, in the DCEU, he doesn't care about that.
No.
And so I think maybe the reason she's involved is because right now, currently in the DCEU,
it's all dark.
All of them are anti-heroes. There isn't really. Is there a really good hero?
I hear what you're saying, but I do think that the Justice Society that they presented, those 4 characters, didn't, at least in the way they were presented, it's the first time we saw them, at least in the way they were presented here, didn't have a particularly dark side. And they did at least think that they were trying to serve a higher justice. And so it's just weird that they're following her. I will say, though, Viola Davis, who plays Amanda Waller, was amazing. Like, had so little screen time, but was probably the best in the entire movie. Like, so incredible.
An actual actor. I mean, no, not like the others. I mean, not to criticize the other people, but
Caleb, can you give Dwayne Johnson your email? I want him to contact you on that. What is that again? What is
I mean, she's an Academy Award winner, right?
She's unbelievable. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, she has a lot of clout.
Oh yeah.
And so I think it makes sense to give kind of the most decorated actor in your screen time.
It would have made
you're right. You're right. It doesn't make a lot of logical sense. There's not really a good justifiable answer for why she's all of a sudden controlling the Justice Society. It's just kind of stupid.
It really is. Yeah.
So, okay.
It was a slap in the face. It was a slap in the face for me. I was like, what?
What? Okay, so I don't know that this is going to end us on a high note, Mark, but it's a question.
Oh man, I was counting on you.
It's a question. I was sitting in the theater, and it was like, I wonder what Mark would have to say about this. And so
it sounds like trouble.
always. Okay, so the boy helps Black Adam try and come up with a catchphrase. And so, like,
tell him the man in black sent you.
Tell him the man in black sent you, and it's a whole thing. It's trying to get it right. You say it right before you kill someone, not after.
Not after.
Right before. And so, I wondered, Mark, what is your catchphrase? If you had a catchphrase, Mark, what would it be?
Man, that is a great question.
I know.
Oh man, I'm going to have to come up with something, and I'm not going to be pleased with it in an hour from now. What would my catchphrase?
Okay, how about this? How about you get like 10 seconds to come up with one, and then you reflect on it, and you come back next week. And if you have a better one, you can come back and you can give us your catchphrase, your new catchphrase.
Okay. My catchphrase, because one, recognize that I don't consider myself a superhero, so it doesn't have to be a superhero catchphrase.
It could be anything.
My catchphrase is, God, it's good. There's nothing that I'm going to say that's going to be good. Let's see. I
should have started the countdown or a drum roll.
All right, that would have been nice. That would have been nice. My catchphrase is. Justice served is love served. I don't know. That's the best I can come up right now.
I like that. You know, if you say it, justice served is love served.
That's the best I can come up with. In the heat of the moment, that's the best I can come up with. So, but you've had more time to think about it than me. What's your catchphrase?
You know what's funny is I didn't ever, whenever I thought of that, I thought of sending it to you, and I didn't even think about what I would say in return. And while you were stalling, I came up with something.
So just like Jesus, I'm flipping the tables.
Flipping them over. Okay, so here's what my 7-year-old daughter, here's what she always says my catchphrase is. I always say it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It'll be
It'll be
fine. And you
fine.
know what? It always is. It always
Fair
is
enough.
fine. So that's
Fair
that's my philosophy.
I like it.
Change the things you can. Don't worry about the rest of it. So,
I like it. I like it.
Mark, it's been fun talking about Black Adam. I know it's kind of a mediocre movie. I liked it more than you did, but it was kind of a fun movie. And there was some meat on those theological bones, weren't there?
And man, I really think we could have talked for another half hour or more. There's so many things that we didn't talk about. So yeah, this was fun. This was fun.
It was, but we better tell everybody what we're going to watch next week. And it might be kind of fun to talk about something for Halloween. Isn't next week Halloween?
Yeah, we will actually be. Yeah,
next
we'll
Monday.
Next Monday we'll be broadcasting live on Halloween. So I'm with you. It kind of makes sense that we do something that's got a little darker, more horror edge to it. And there's this movie that came out this year on Amazon. It's called Last Night in Soho.
Oh yeah.
It's by Edgar Wright, who's a great writer. And it's a psychological thriller. It follows a young woman mysteriously able to sort of enter into sort of the glamorous 1960s through dreams and that kind of thing. But they start splintering. Like at first it's all good, but then the dreams start splintering and it starts getting darker and she gets more caught up in it and more, I think from what I'm seeing, unable to escape from that altered reality. So it sounds like a kind of perfect for our show on Halloween.
I think that's right. And you know what? As you're describing it, I'm remembering that I watched it a couple of times. Yeah, like I watched part of it on a plane, and then like I landed. I watched another, so I don't really remember it. I could use a rewatch. A rewatch of it. But it's interesting. It's an interesting movie. I think good for Halloween.
Perfect. And so we encourage everybody else to please go out and make sure you watch that this week so that you can come back and join us on Monday next week for the next episode of the Moonshine Jesus Show. And as always, we thank you for being with us, and we'll catch you the next time on the Moonshine Jesus Show. Yeah.
Moonshine